Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Welcome back to Fast Friends with Dan Walsh. We have Bryan Volpenhein back on for part 2 of his story. We went through his origins, how he got recruited to Ohio State, how he got onto the national team, how he became an Olympian, decided to come back to be an Olympian again. And on that second journey, he took us in the boat, setting a world record and winning an Olympic gold medal for the first time in 40 years. And we pick up in that fall of 2004, where something calls Bryan to come back for number 3. So Bryan, welcome back to Fast Friends. I could barely take that cliffhanger, and I know what happens next. So,
Yeah.
dude, it's really good to have you back. Thanks for doing a part 2. And Justin, my co-host, is here. We got Luke and Steve, the support bunnies. And if you're ready to rock, baby, tell us why you decided to do it all over again.
Mostly because of the win in 04. I would say that was the main reason. That's like you're still sort of on that high, and you're like, yeah, of course I'm coming back. I'm gonna do this forever. This was easy. You like forget about how hard it was and all like all the tough times that you went through to get there and the struggles and all that. And so I kind of knew right away that I was going to try to row again. But I also um, I think I was going to try to coach. So that right afterwards, I applied for the freshman job at Washington at UW, and I didn't get it, and Callahan got it, and obviously that has worked out well for them, and but I went there and I was sort of a volunteer assistant kind of for Bob for the varsity. And so that was like, I was still trying to row. I wanted to do some coaching and get into that. And so I moved to Seattle and started like the coaching, and then Deacon was there. And so we were rowing in the pair. And so that was like the next phase of the sort of '08 campaign. That's kind of when it all started and where I went right after Athens. Um, And then, I was training in the pair with Deacon and I was coaching, and I just did that for the whole year of '05, basically until the season was over in the spring. And then I moved back to Princeton to start training again full time. Um, and, Deacon got sick of me at one point and was like, dude, I can't take the way Volp trains. And super, he's super lazy and doesn't want to do like half the work. And so, I mean, we had a lot of fun what we were doing when we were doing, but I think he's a different type of athlete that operates in a sort of a different environment. And so, um, he came back, and then he moved back, and then Bo came out to row with me. Um, and Bo and I were a little bit more suited to. He's more accepting of my laziness.
So can you so thank you for sharing that, because I think you actually just trigger another question that is kind of a legend that surrounds you from the outside, from what I understand. In that, like, you had the ability to turn on speed whenever it was called upon,
Hmm.
but yet it wasn't like externally facing typically. Is that
Yeah.
accurate? Where it's just like, yeah, like, tell me the day, tell me the time, I'll be there, but don't call me beforehand. Is that somewhat accurate, or
Yeah,
we're not?
that's pretty accurate.
Basically. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
think
like go ahead.
I was just saying it's funny, and I think it is in some ways true, right? And I think we as your teammates played into the myth too. But
Yeah.
you know, just knowing, like, just talking to you about your origin story too, and I think it's important to remind myself and the audience is, but your foundation of how you got in there was you just did the work, right? Like you came to Ohio State and you loved the work and you loved the challenge and you loved the fact that somebody said 556 and you're going to chase that. And in Princeton, you're like, or in Elkhart, I'm just going to do what they say. And here you are now, you've become Bryan Volpenhein. And I think that's just like the really key thing I want young athletes to grab from this is you had to do the work and win the race to become Bryan Volpenhein to actually create that luxury that you talk about now, where it didn't just happen, right? Like your laziness, and I use that in
Yeah.
quotes, right? In quotes, is was so earned, right? Was so earned.
Yeah, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek, like,
Yes. No,
um,
that's what I think is important, is to know that
That's the whole point.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very tongue in cheek. It's very tongue in cheek.
I would say there's always been something sort of bubbling underneath the surface, and I kind of hide it a little bit, the competitiveness of it, and I can I I think I put on a little bit of an air of like, a little bit lazy, a little bit nonchalant,
Nonchalant, yeah,
yeah, that
sure.
kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And so, but I did that, I think that was my natural personality. But then, when I talk to athletes now, they say, so like what makes you want to do the training and what makes you want to pull hard and do all that stuff. I kind of go back to sort of like you have to have something inside you that motivates you. And for me, in college especially, I was angry. Like I was mad a lot, and this helped me get rid of that. And there were sort of two sides to who I was in college. Like I had a whole set of friends that were not involved in rowing and not even a part of that, and I had all my rowing friends, and I kind of lived in both worlds. Um, but it's like my parents got divorced when I was a senior in high school, and it was not a easy. I don't think it was easy for them, and it wasn't easy for us. Like I remember, when I found out basically that something was off, I was driving to homecoming to like the hotel downtown Cincinnati,
Yeah,
and I was speeding in my 1985 Pontiac 6000, and I passed my dad on the highway, and I didn't know, and he was driving a 1980 Corolla, and he caught up with me and pulled me over basically with my like homecoming date and
your
like
date.
another couple in the back.
That's
And
crazy.
just like yelled at me. And then it didn't like dawn on me until like a few days later. I was like, wait a minute, where was he going?
No,
And then I started to put the pieces together. I was like, oh, maybe things aren't quite what they seem. And uh, but that was in there always. That kind of like frustration of like that sort of aimlessness and just being mad at the world kind of thing was in there. And when I found rowing, that gave me an outlet. And
yep.
so that's what I tell athletes. It's like you have to tap into that. Whatever it is about you that sort of self motivates you and drives you, you have to find that and utilize that mostly on the rowing machine, but then transferring it to the water essentially. Um, so I always have that in there. But so I think I kind of put on this other air, but like under the surface is that competitive edge.
Hmm.
And that's kind of part of the game too, I guess.
Yeah. Thank thank you. Thanks for sharing, especially that. And the resiliency of what you described is like, again, the stoicism that you bring to something, and the nonchalantness is it's not easy what you went through as a kid. And I think an interesting stat that I've learned recently is that most elite athletes, especially in the Olympic movement, are using some form of you know life event. And I don't throw the word trauma around lightly, but it's something that negatively affects them, that show resiliency as a child that they had to overcome. And sport is that outlet for it. And you know knowing you, just that really shows it, right? Because I think what you did really well to look up to, and this is where, seeing you come back, right? Like it was really inspiring for you to come back, because it was like, oh, he wants more.
Mhm.
And I do think it was funny that you hit it, that you wanted more. And
Yeah.
it was a thing where it was like trying to figure you out.
Yeah.
Was really cool. It was really cool to see how you played that nonchalantness. And I do remember the transition of Bo and Deacon. And I remember you talking a little shit and
Yeah.
saying to Joey Hansen, because we all were living with him, and he goes, "Man, Deacon could be winning the NSR right now."
But then they ended up
And you
beating
and
us.
no, you and Bo won.
Oh, that's right, we did. They beat us
Yeah.
into speed order.
This
They
is
beat
a
us into
case
speed
in
order.
point. Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, yeah, we did.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think, yeah. So I think that I think I like to, I kind of like want to pick up there because
Yeah.
you were coaching, and I think that was really cool. And you had Callahan, and Callahan just came off of being a spare on this, at that Olympic team too. So again, talk about having an axe to grind as a coach.
Hmm.
But when you came back into Princeton, I'm excited to hear this version and have Steve to reflect on it too. And kind of Luke was at Cambridge, and I was sculling, and what was that spring like? You're coming back, and we do have, I think it was 5 of the returning gold medalists in camp. So I think that's a lot of medalists coming back to camp.
Yeah.
And now you're looked at as the leader, right? You had become Bryan Volpenhein. So did you feel pressure coming back into that spring, or did you just kind of feel like this is just my party to fucking lead?
No, I think it was it wasn't really pressure to perform, I guess, but I'd say it was more sense of responsibility to um like be as good as I was the year before, you know. And I feel like '05 I was the fittest I ever was. And um and I felt like the training was good, and I think things were going really well, and it was really fun. And so I think it was more just a sense of knowing that like what we had just done in '04, and like if we're going to repeat it, like I was going to have to be, as good, if not better than I was. And um, just a sense of responsibility to kind of not kind of screw around as much. Not that I did that. I kind of, I always kind of screw around a little bit, but it was like just this sense of, oh, okay, I have to like show up and be the athlete that I was before, at least.
Yeah. And that's not an easy place, right? To
No.
be just as good as the best in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
It's
know,
like a
I
repeating anything is hard,
yeah.
right? And so,
Yeah.
but it was like a smaller group when we came back. It wasn't this big giant group in Princeton, and it was like a more focused kind of group of athletes. And we ended up doubling up, and
Yeah.
because we didn't
Which is a
have
big
that.
ask, a big ask, a
Yeah,
big ask of athletes.
at what point was that like challenge issued? It was almost like by the time I was in the mix, it was almost like, hey, these guys won gold. I want to see if they can do something else.
I wonder if part of it was just that like JR wasn't around that year. He had taken the year off. So part of me kind of wonders if that was Mike. Like I bet they could do it without JR. you know, uh, and just see. But I think it was also just that Mike didn't have a lot of athletes around, and so he wanted, he just thought it was an idea that he could do. Finally we could try this doubling up and see how it goes. And I don't actually remember the conversation that we had about it. It just kind of like started to happen because we had that 4 that was pretty good, and it was clipping along. And then I remember I've some videos of that. No, that might have been '07. But anyway, the video, like some of the videos I have from that time are like, these 4s are pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just that 1 4. It was like there was another one that was good too. And so I think Mike was trying to build a core group of athletes for the whole next quadrennium, and get some results and some solid experience there.
I was actually watching video from that this morning.
Yeah. I have video,
Oh.
Steve, I have a video of us in a 4 that is like quite good. I show it all the time.
Yeah.
I say, see this big guy right here, don't watch him. Everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And that's really, and I think that's really amazing to think about, the as you guys came back and the young talent like Steve's coming up, and I had, I'm having this interesting seat come look again, because the sculling side of things is Wyatt came back to sculling and he went for the single. And
Mhm.
so there was a fair amount of talent that was back. Bloomer came back into the system, made that
Yeah.
Condor, Josh Inman, Birdman had gotten a bronze at Worlds with Steve in the non-Olympic Worlds. And so he had some experience and he was getting better. Justin, just for reference with Condor, his other nickname was Watch Out because in 04, he would just kind of like sneak up in a single when you were in practice and go, or you would start rowing up on him in the pair and he'd just go, watch out, because he was so slow. He was so bad in that camp in 04 that he was like relegated to the single.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And that's, I think, he then becomes in this 8 with Steve and Volp, Matt Deacon, Bo Hoopman, Mike Bloomquist, and they win a gold again. You go back-to-back golds. And it's a pretty incredible feat. The 4, I forget what happened, but an injury in the 4 caused you guys to get 5th.
We got 5th. Yeah. It was still good. It was good racing. I just think the injury kind of we weren't at our top form.
Yeah. And shout out to Matt Deacon for taking a quarter zone shot and getting the 8 and winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that was in the back of our heads, is like, hey, we got a real shot at this 8. Let's,
Focus on that.
Yeah.
So you go through that, world cycle, then it's kind of like this in between period, of this cycle of going towards 08. Like, you had already moved back to Princeton. So like, what was kind of your plan? Just kind of stick with or were you starting to get other thoughts of like, what I
No,
wanted
so
to do?
yeah, no, I was all in, right?
Okay.
I was like, and then we go to Worlds and we do well, and I'm like, highly motivated. Like, they're still coming off the Athens high, and it's like things are going well, and it's fun and it's exciting still, and so and then I moved back to Princeton that fall of 05 after Worlds to sort of like really commit and like be there. And it didn't take very long where I'm like sleeping at the Aquinas, which is like this church in Princeton, and I'm sleeping under a pool table in the rec room. And at this point, I think I'm 29 or something. I don't know. Yeah, 29, late 20s. And I'm laying there and I'm thinking, like, I start to have these thoughts of like, what am I going to do with my life? I cannot sleep like this forever. Like, I need to like start this, make some money, because I was living pretty much like, by my shoestrings for this entire time. And now luckily it was cheaper to live in Princeton back then, so it wasn't that bad. But and so I'm laying there and I just was like, well, I like cooking. I had like, in the lead up to Athens, I had like bought this Indian cookbook and I cooked the whole thing front to back. And then I had got this How to Cook Everything by Mark Bittman, and I was like working through that cookbook. And so I just had really loved it. And I grew up watching this like weird cooking show after school, which was called Great Chefs of the World. Have you guys seen this one? It's like an old PBS show. And the premise was they had 3 different chefs and each one cooked a different dish. It was like an appetizer, main course, and dessert. And I was like fascinated with that show. And so that just kept coming back into my head. So I started researching culinary schools and decided that's what I was going to do. And so I guess it was probably that summer that I started doing the research and thinking about it. And then after Worlds in 05, I applied and decided to go and do it. And I went to the Art Institute in Seattle and started going to school and just stopped rowing I said, I think I had told Mike, like, I'm done. I'm gonna like retire. But I think in the back of my head, I kind of knew we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
And so, but when I did that, I was all in on that. Like, I just went and did it. And I think rowing was not in my mind for the majority of the time.
So just to pause there for a sec. So I think that's super interesting. There's a lot of things to unpack with what you just said. So first and foremost, like, you're a returning Olympic gold medalist and you're living under a pool table,
Yeah.
number one, which is insane. And then, on top of that, you know, you're kind of self-taught chef, right? By the way, like I don't know the show you were talking about, but Jacques Pepin was a big PBS staple in my house.
Yeah.
Very good cutlery techniques. We could talk about that on another podcast.
Yeah.
But that said, like, yeah, I mean, what was that kind of thought process like, right? Like, I gotta imagine you're staring up. Hopefully there's not like bubble gum or something stuck underneath the table that you're staring at. But like you're literally like under
The
a pool
American
table and
Heroes
you're like,
coaster.
yeah, like
Yeah.
like yeah, what's next? And I mean, to your point on having the conversation with your coach, Mike at the time, for the audience, like Mike Tatey, is it like, hey dude, I'm done? Or is it like I gotta rip the Band-Aid off to do something else to know? Was it more of a mindset of like, I have to do something else to know where I really want to commit my energy? Just
I
curious.
think, yeah, no, I
Or is
think
it
it
just like
was,
burnout or just
it was,
curious?
I think it was a little bit of burnout. Like, I
Okay.
think finally, like the come down from Athens hit me.
Sure. Yeah.
And
A year later. Right.
yeah, exactly. And then
Understandable.
like, as you get older, you just start to naturally think about like,
Yeah.
how am I going to like live, and honestly, I didn't really
I think we've
develop.
all spent time underneath that pool table
Yeah.
at some point in our careers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not
See, but
metaphorically. And
what a
not metaphorically.
fascinating statement about the journey, the amateur journey of rowers.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? It's
For
just
real.
kind of like, I was actually thinking about this earlier today, and I don't know why it popped in my head, but I remembered we used to order and pay for our own extra t-shirts with the USA crest on them, or we'd
Mhm.
order extra unisuits with USA on them because we knew we weren't going to have enough kit provided to us.
Oh yeah.
And I was all like, it's fascinating to think that we were doing stuff like that to be able to feel that we were all kitted up and able to represent. Now, granted, you go to the Olympics, it's a different story. You're filling shopping carts full of different equipment and stuff. But going to Worlds every year, that was like, oh well, we're gonna get a unisuit and we'll get maybe a t-shirt and a jacket. But if you want anything else, we can order
Here's
it
the
and put a
order
crest
form.
on it,
Yeah.
and here's the order form, and you can pay for it. And we were like, okay, we'd happily sign up for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you're sleeping under a pool table. So it's fascinating to, I think just kind of level setting what this is. You have an Olympic gold medalist living under a pool table to keep it all going. Already
Mhm.
proven, already successful, first time the 8-1 in 40 years,
Mhm.
and you're under a pool table going, maybe culinary school, I mean, that's just like, it's just too bad that you were dealing with that under that pool table, going forward. Not a bad thing that you went to culinary school or anything like that,
Yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
like, hey, we got an Olympic gold medalist who came back right afterwards, got right back into it, went to Worlds, is crushing it still, and then, well, it's too tough to balance the whole thing. So you find yourself needing to go off and explore something different, because as you said, I'm in my late 20s. What am I gonna do to sustain myself going forward from here?
Yeah. And
So
and like, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, that in the context, it's like I came up with all these highly successful people who went on to have all these careers, and you know, and they were working while they were training, and some of it is on me. Like, I didn't really do a ton outside of rowing to like hone any crafts or like have any life skills. I had odd jobs here and there, and I worked at the Home Depot, and I did things like that. Um, but I never like went out and got a real job, which I definitely could have done. But it wasn't in me to kind of be able to do that and be really good at rowing. So I had to pick. And so that's what I picked. And so I think that caught up with me. And so, yeah, it's just like a little bit of a midlife crisis at that age where you're like, I gotta try something else. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do after rowing. And so that was my best choice. and
So-
or the thing that seemed most interesting to me that I really wanted to go and do.
Well, and it's just, I think you brought up an interesting point. You felt like you had to be all in on rowing to win. Because I just also think about going into 04, most of the guys that made boats
Mhm.
didn't work, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a difference between the 90s where the guys had jobs and it looked like it was a really positive thing,
Mhm.
and that there was a narrow miss, right? And
Yeah,
you did such a great job, and you use the word choke, right? And that's a really powerful word as an athlete to say and own, is
Yeah.
admit when you had a bad performance. So I think that's strength and resolve that you've grown to say that. And we know a lot of our friends in those boats did wind up getting jobs in, say, finance or law, and did that, or medicine, and did that while training. And you think about, you went back, I think the training is really important. I just think about the exponential curve of going to the Olympics, participating, medaling, winning. It becomes this really tight steep curve, right? It's almost vertical at that point. And those little 1% of marginal gains do start to add up there. And it's just interesting and a little disheartening that you had to go back to living under the table at the Aquinas, which is actually worse than you were living going into 04, where you had an apartment. And I think it's a very frustrating thing, but it's also like, is having a job the answer, or is having the ability to train without fear of eating and sleeping the answer? Because having a job is a distraction from the
Yeah.
goal of being the best.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of both. Like, I think they both have their pluses and minuses, and you just have to manage whichever situation you're in, right? And obviously, like, all of those things, everything that's happened to me in my life has been my choice. That there's nothing that's happened to me mostly that I'm like I had no control over or no influence over.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I could have done things differently that year, and I could have, but then maybe we wouldn't have won again in 05, right? So it's give and take. And I think, like, a little bit of adversity, a little bit of discomfort can go a long way in that for that third 500, basically. So, like, when push comes to shove in a race, in a 2K, and you're starting to doubt yourself, like, a little, that you lean on those experiences of um when things were a little bit tougher. So it's like, I don't know if the answer is, going from like that to, like, all of a sudden athletes get all kinds of levels of support. I think there's a middle ground there that, where people, because, it's not like they're going to make millions. So you kind of do need to go out and, like, have some sort of other life skill that you're doing alongside your rowing, so that you can, when you're done, you have a direction. I think that's really important for people, is to sort of have, like, not a plan, but, like, just at least something that that you can go do after you're done. So you're not sort of you're not spending too much time in this moment when you're done rowing, where you're like, now what? Like, I think that's where you can get yourself into trouble, sort of emotionally and mentally. So I think there's a balance there.
Yeah. Well
But,
said.
I
Well
don't,
said. Well
I
said.
think it's good, but
Fair point. So
Yeah.
so take us into the kitchen, chef. So
Yeah, yeah.
you've gone to culinary school. Did
So,
you
go ahead.
did you wind up working in the industry? Like, were you a sous chef and a line chef? Like, what kind of transpired after that as far as your culinary career? Just curious.
No,
And, like,
yeah,
what type
yeah.
of cuisine did you focus on? I mean,
Fre-
you did Indian cookbooks. What
Yeah,
else? Yeah.
yeah. It was a French school, so it was like
Okay.
all French techniques, classic
Sure.
French techniques. And it was really fun to go to school there, because I was by far the oldest student.
Love it.
And I'm on a team with all these, like, high school kids, basically. And
Got it.
so, like, and I'm, like, friends with them, and we're all novices again in this situation. And so I think going back and being a novice at something essentially was very beneficial for me, and learning a new skill was great. And just having the privilege and being able to, like, take the time to do that,
Sure.
I think was great. So I did the school. And I'm biking everywhere because this was also when gas prices spiked, and I had a old Suburban.
Command. Oh, you graduated from the
I
Comanche. I mean,
graduated
I will
yeah.
say as a car guy, your car pedigree is quite interesting
Yeah.
from the the
Oh
ones you've
man,
mentioned, the
Yeah,
Comanche. Now you have a Suburban.
the Suburban was awesome. The red
It was
Suburban was
great.
awesome.
It
Oh, we
was
loved
great.
having that. That
This-
thing got us to so many beach days in San
Oh,
Diego.
man.
Oh,
It was
I
great.
love that
But that thing
Suburban.
got what,
Yeah.
like 8 miles to the gallon
Maybe.
at
Yeah,
best?
maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
The window kept falling in the back and crashing, and
Yeah,
I
it's
don't get to
shattering.
don't want to get too tangential on the Suburban, but
I guess my point was
Point
that
was it got very expensive to drive it.
so
yeah.
I sold it, and
Okay.
I was biking everywhere. So I was biking all over Seattle. I got down to under 200 pounds, and I was like racing, at like 225 or whatever. So I lost a bunch of weight. Um, but in culinary school at your last semester, I got this apprenticeship at a really high-end restaurant in Seattle called Rover's. Um, they're not, they've sort of closed that and opened up other places now, but um, so I would go to school all day, and then I would bike all the way across town, and I would work in the restaurant until 2 a.m. And then I would go out with the cooks, have a quick beer and a shot, and then bike home and go to sleep and get up and do it all the next day. And classes started at 10. Uh, and so that was amazing, like 9 months where I was doing that apprenticeship. And when I finished school, I got a job at the seafood house, like right on the canal there, called Ponte's, right in Fremont, which is like, if you're familiar with Seattle, it's like right by the Blue Bridge, on the other side of Lake Union there. And that was awesome. I mean, just crazy and awesome. This big fish house, and just like they're doing like 200 plus covers a night, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's crazy. So I got to do that, and that was great. Yeah, and so I mean, I think the thing I loved about cooking and being in a kitchen, and like if I was younger and I didn't have kids, I think I would be doing that right now.
Yeah. Stop.
Because it's like it reminds you a lot of like it has the same elements and qualities of like a training camp, or like a training center, where it's a very intense, high pressure environment. Performance is the most important thing, and consistency is there too. So you have to perform at a high level, you have to perform under pressure, and you have to do it consistently. And so there was a lot of like crossover between what I had been doing and what I was doing in the kitchen. And I was never like a chef or anything like that. I was like on the line. I was working like pantry or garde-manger, and like putting out salads and appetizers and things like that. Um, doing a lot of the prep stuff, like that, because you just have to work your way up. They're not going
Yeah,
to just
sure.
trust you to like cook the expensive proteins and all that stuff. So, but I loved every minute of it.
So long before I was a marketer, I like to remind a lot of my younger employees that I work with that I started out as a dishwasher. Um, so what was that conversation like though in the kitchen, right? Because you do become very close to the people that you work with on the line. Obviously,
Mhm.
like there's the camaraderie post shift, right? The after shift is there's the family meal piece, and then obviously there's the post shift piece, right?
Yeah.
And so there's always that kind of connection, camaraderie. So like what was that conversation like? Did you mention like, hey, I've committed to being a chef now. I just went to the culinary school. I'm here at Rovers, or
Yeah.
at Garmin's, or whatever it may be. But what is that conversation with your um coworkers, pre-shift, post-shift, like where they're like, hey man, like what's your story? You're just like, well, I like a year ago I want to go medal that, and like but hey, if you want no croutons, I got you. Like I just curious like how that goes, because I can tell you I never came across a gold medalist anytime I worked on the line or in a kitchen or back of
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. So many coincidences, or like, I guess not
Okay.
but like, so many, like I just met the right people.
All
So
right, fair enough.
At Rovers, I got in from my instructor knew the chef
Yeah.
and the chef de cuisine, which is like basically the head chef
Yep.
is like out doing everything for the restaurant, writing the menus, ordering,
Sure.
doing all that. The
Executive
chef de
chef. Yep.
cuisine is like kind of doing everything
Yep.
in the kitchen. And so she knew him, one of my instructors knew him and introduced me to him. Like I went over there and interviewed, and it turns out that he's like a huge Olympics fan and
Okay.
collects pins. His dad collected pins, like
All
just
right.
Oh,
loves
wow.
it.
Oh, wow.
So that was like a great bonus. But
Yeah,
at the
it's a good
same
icebreaker.
time,
Yeah.
like at the same time, he would like talk my ear off, and which I love him, and I still talk to him today. And he's just an awesome dude. But like it was like to the point where I think the other cooks were like, "Hey man, go clean these lobsters, dude. Stop talking."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? I need
Yeah.
I need these like big bags of garlic. I need them all peeled. And so there was a lot of that, but it
Sure.
was all lighthearted. It wasn't like you see in the movies or shows or whatever. It was intense,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like nobody was yelling at me. But they were like, "Hey man, that's great.
Here's the
You need,
task.
yeah,
Yeah.
here's what you have to
Yeah.
go do
Yeah.
right now
Di-
because we're going to serve food in about 3 hours and none of it's done. So good luck. Oh, and by the way, you have to cook us family meal."
Yeah.
Uh, and so like a lot of that, and then and eventually, like, so it was hard in the beginning, like at the beginning of service, and like when I would show up, and I would just bust my ass to do whatever they said. I was like, these guys know way more than me about this, so I'm just gonna do
Yeah.
it. And then when you would go out afterwards, and like,
Yeah.
or when the service is over and you're cleaning the kitchen, that's when it becomes a little bit more. They ask some questions, they talk about your experience,
Yeah.
and then you get to know them, and you get to know about all the things they do, and so it becomes more normal.
Super cool. Yeah.
I'm
That's
also
so
older than I was older than a lot of them too.
Yeah.
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 And it's funny because Justin, you and I talked about it. I grew up, I started bussing tables and prepping before I was legally able to work in a seafood restaurant, and did that all the way through freshman year of college, and
Yeah.
made got to the point where I was on the burners, right, in the
Yeah.
seafood
Yeah.
restaurant, doing all the scallops and the fancier stuff. And you're right. There's a lot of parallels to the intensity, like when the tickets are just flying out. And
hmm
I think the kitchen, I do think working in a restaurant, I like the fact that you talk about how, because there was work to be done, it was like, yeah, we don't care what you did there, because right now these lobsters have to be cleaned, or as Justin said, do you want croutons or not?
hmm
And what I would love to know is, like, was that good preparation for when you came back a little out
Oh
of
yeah.
shape? A little, all of a sudden the gamemanship didn't quite work without the fitness.
Yeah. Oh, it
Yeah.
doesn't. No.
Well,
Because we thought you were gone, right? We were like, oh man, he's lost
Yeah,
it, he's
yeah.
done,
Yeah,
he
so-
won, he's
Yeah,
under a
what-
food
what-
table.
I think the
what was the
segue-
transition though? What was the transition to be like?
Yeah,
I'm
like
going
what
back.
got you
I'm
back?
going
What got you back?
yeah.
Yeah, what
Did
got you
Mike
back?
did Mike just call you and was like, "Hey, I want to send you this guy"?
No. It was I called Mike. So
Yeah, give us a timeline though, just
So
so
this
everybody
is-
understands where we're at in the cycle.
so 05 I moved to Seattle. After Worlds I moved to Seattle.
Right.
I enroll in culinary school, and
Right.
it's only a year and a half.
Okay.
So by 07, like the summer of 06, no, 07.
Okay.
Fall of 07, I guess it was.
Okay.
No, fall of 06.
Fall of
I was done with
06.
culinary school, and I'm like, I'm working in kitchens, and it's like it's fun, but I start to get a little bit of the itch and like a
Okay.
little bit of the bug. I'm like, I miss being that kind of have that strength and that fitness, and I just kind of, maybe I'm not done. Maybe I got another one in me, and like maybe that's what I need to do. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and we talked about it a little bit, and I think she was like, I don't know if she was really excited about me going back. And I didn't have a ton of money, and so I called Mike up and I said, Mike, I'm ready to come back if you'll have me. I only have one problem. I don't have a lot of money to get there and to like, get a place to live. And so I literally think he cut me a check for like $2,500. and sent it to me, and then I made my way back. And then, but I was much lighter and not nearly as strong, and had not been working out. Like the only exercise I was really doing was biking everywhere,
Riding your bike. Yeah.
and just working nonstop and not eating as much. So yeah, so that was like the transition. And so then I made my way back to Princeton. I guess I would say I don't remember the exact how like getting back into the mix was. To me, it almost felt like I never left in the sense of like the guys and the people and the environment. It was just fun to be back. I mean, you guys might remember that.
Yeah, that was my question.
Wasn't
for
it
Steve
wasn't it
and
like
Dan.
winter
what
of
was it?
06 when we had to like go out and do a training camp with you in Washington?
Yes,
didn't
that's
we-
what it,
Well,
yes, you did.
He
Hey,
he had
I'm a ham and egger champion.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did the ham and egger.
yeah. Steve was the new Deacon and Bo.
Yeah.
Deacon and Bo, because like Justin, you asked a good point. So how did Volp come back?
Yeah, because I'm basically like,
Yeah, that's a great.
I'm
it's a great
envisioning
question.
it's like Casper has returned, right?
Well,
Like,
06, yeah. Oh,
it's like
06. Well,
you're
yeah.
you're
It
off
was right.
and,
It was
like,
winter.
I
We're
gotta
talking
imagine.
about winter of 06, right?
Yeah,
like
so
that.
well, yeah, so 06 was weird in terms of like I was sculling right up until the beginning of the summer. And Juice, who we talked to on a previous episode, was getting his citizenship, and it was a little chaotic.
Great,
And we
great
went-
listen, great plug.
Yeah.
Please listen to that episode. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah, it's
Giuseppe
and it's great.
Bizzone is the
And
episode. But go
he
ahead.
comes back into Justin's into Volp's story too in 07, but 06 you were at school and this 8 came together and it was pretty fast, but it was just really inexperienced and like I think that's important. And we had won the heat, won the semi, and then this was in Eaton, and then we came in third. And the interesting thing about Eaton is I hate making excuses, but after that race, FISA decided they finally had to seed lanes because of conditions. So I'm just saying, right? Some of them had to prove to them the lanes were unfair, and maybe,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
they were
so
unfair. Yeah, whatever.
yeah. So anyway, lanes are like, and so now it's like, fuck. They won in 04, they won in 08. We got bronze, a tight bronze in 06. And I sometimes wonder if that's what enticed you back in a way of like, oh, they need me, or if it wasn't even on your register, but that's when we did go to Seattle. I think Steve went first.
No, we went as a group from.
We were in Chula. I think we were in
Chula.
Yeah.
And didn't you guys come out? Didn't you guys come out and race the? Was that when we raced the opening day, or was that the year before?
That was the year before. No, but what I remember is when kind of knowing you were coming back, is we had a fundraiser dinner at Mike Hess's house, and you cooked.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And we were having so much fun being like, "Oh Brian, Brian, your leek soup is like just we were just effing with you." And I just remember you kind of like, "Well, wait till I come back, bitches." Like I think that was it. And that winter, you started training again.
Yeah.
And that took us into the spring of 07. And I think that first NSR was like, you moved back to Princeton. We all moved back to Princeton from winter training. So that was it. We were in Seattle. We did a camp to get you enticed.
Yeah.
You were enticed.
Then we left Scott there, right?
And
Scott was there.
Scott Galt was finishing school, and you and Scott came to the NSR. And it was not the same result as with Bo.
No, but that was all me.
Huh?
I think I was all fat and out of shape,
Yeah.
Or skinny and out of shape, I guess.
Well, Shivani Palmer, a shout out to her, has this great book, picture book called At Longest Odds, and she mentions that. So she had heard about the great Bryan Volpenhein, and took a picture of you at the starting line, and she was like, "This guy."
Pasty and
yeah. But I think it's just really amazing because that's where the real courage, I think, of you came in, right? Is to be in the B final of the NSR, which is something you had not lost in in a while,
Mhm.
and face that, right? Face that moment and say, I want more. So I'd love to know a little bit more exactly like what that was like to have your first real L in a while. And what was it that made you just decide to say like, nah, I'm going back into the grind. It's just an L.
Um, I mean, it it was it was humbling, obviously. And I felt mostly I felt bad for Scott. And I felt like I let him down. And I knew I wasn't at that point. I was like, oh shit, I'm not ready. Like I got serious work ahead of me, and this is gonna take some time. Uh, but I felt like I just felt responsible for Scott, and I felt bad for that result for him because he's a better rower than that, and he didn't we should have been better. If that was like for me, it was like, okay, I got to be a little bit more serious and push myself a little bit. And there's two moments that I remember from that spring and early summer that kind of spurred me on a little bit. The first one was, I think it was after the NSR. We were doing some pieces in big boats, and the boat I was in was kind of we were struggling. We were losing. It wasn't great, and but it was like hard fought, but it wasn't like we weren't winning. And we finished one of the pieces, and Ned yelled out, "Overrated." It was like my first time like
Oh
doing
my
some sea
God.
racing.
Oh my God.
So he yelled it out,
I remember
and
this.
I immediately snapped like up. I was like, "What the motherfucker just say?" And I just looked at him. I said, "Ned, be careful." And then we just rode away. And he kind of poked the bear there a little bit, and that sort of was good. I mean, it motivated me. I mean, and I love Ned. Like, it's not like, you got to be able to take that kind of candid feedback if you're going to be in a high performance environment.
Yeah.
And so I gave him a little something back, and then it was fine. And then we just continued on training. And then I remember a little bit later, we were doing these lactate tests on the water, which we had never done before. And Fritz was there.
Yeah.
And it was like you would go out and you would do a piece, and you would come to the dock, and he would prick your finger, and he would get some numbers, and then you'd go out and you did that a bunch of times, right? And I remember afterwards, and Fritz and I go way back. I like probably knew him the longest at that point besides Mike. And so we're buddies, and we're both from Ohio, and so we get each other, and we just had this like connection. And he just sort of we're on the dock, or on the tarmac there in front of the boathouse, and he just sort of walks up and grabs my arm and starts like walking me over into the corner, basically down by the water. And he goes, I know you think you're going really hard, and I know you think it hurts, but it doesn't, and you're not. I was like,
because he knew your
oh,
physiology.
yeah, because he
He
saw
knew
the
your
numbers.
physiology. He saw the
Yeah.
numbers.
And he
He
knew
saw
what
the
I had done
numbers.
before. And so he was like,
Oh,
and so
man.
that kind of was like, that was the big wake up call. That was like, okay, it's time to get serious.
Yeah.
So would you say like it's time to get serious is like more like I guess I'm just trying to compute like you're
Do extra workouts.
no offense, like you're out of shape. Like you're working on a
Yeah.
line till 2 a.m. for
Oh,
9
yeah.
months straight.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
you're not, no offense, you're not a specimen of rowing perfection. So like, is this more just like, hey, I'm just trying to correlate the like, okay, I got to get serious versus like my physiology needs to catch up with my mindset, because it's not like I don't believe that you were probably unserious about it, because what you've told us in the past few hours of these, the 2 episodes so far is like,
Yeah,
when you're in, right?
I get,
And so I guess that's just the question, just to
Oh, I
just
get
make
what
sure
you're
like
saying.
people are clear. Like,
Yeah, I
it's
get
not
what
like
you're
you
saying.
weren't serious. It was just like, all right, my body needs to, go to 10 on like catching up to where I should be where my mental already could be.
I'll put it this way, I think.
Okay.
I think one of the pitfalls that athletes in any sport really fall into is they'll have success, and they'll get to a certain point in their career. They'll take time away, and they'll come back and they'll have kind of forgotten like
Yeah.
all the work and all the things they did to get them that success in the first place. And so, and they just think it's going to happen again if they just kind of go through the motions
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like do the
Gotcha.
work, going through the motions. I'm here, like I'm rowing.
It should
Like
click.
it should
Yeah.
click and come back quicker than it is,
Got it.
or it should just happen,
Yeah.
right? And I think I was like very close to falling into that trap. And
Yeah.
I think when Fritz said that to me, it like snapped me out of that and was like,
Got it.
okay, maybe an extra workout here and there. And, you know, maybe,
Sure.
um,
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that, because I think that's important for people to understand.
yeah.
And that, I mean, it's funny. It's like that is a cool thing is, and you know what, like Fritz is really a lost treasure of our sport. I mean, he just had so much knowledge on testing rowing specifically in physiology. I think so much of what we talk about, and this is rower academy talk, but like about training and Fritz's knowledge. And
Oh, and he could
That-
be cutting even though he was the nicest old man ever. You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, no,
never
he-
swore, never, but he would just look at you and tell it to you, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, that hurts!" Like,
oh, he just because he knew the physiology, man. But it was also like when Fritz said you had good numbers, like for real.
Yeah.
You knew
Yeah.
you knew you had good numbers, and so
Yeah.
I think the moment that I knew that you were taking it serious again, because I think this is the other interesting thing to share, you know, with Justin and Luke from the outside is Bryan at this time came back,
Yeah.
and there was this group of us that were really pissed about not winning in 06, and we were training, we were pushing ourselves that much, and in fact, that fall we were so angry at the result, we went and won the Jan Hansa Cup for the first year. We won the Head of the Charles. We went to town. Lots of guys were PRing, and we wanted Bryan to get to form, and we're just kind of like we're waiting for it, but it was also getting to the point we didn't know. And Bryan, I don't know if you remember this, but it was also you wanted to do the 4 too. You really wanted to do the 4. You wanted to prove that you could do it. You had done it at Lucerne. And I think for both good and bad, it forced us to dilute the talent instead of what we had always done is try to prioritize the 8. And we were trying to see if we could do both. And I remember we had this elite nationals in the middle of the summer, and based off of pair selection, we had a 4 that was really fast. And we switched out you and Wyatt for that. And you came in, and we had taken, we were really taking off. We were winning all the 4 pieces easily. And I think that was when I remember you saying in that boat feeling like, oh, I'm back.
Yeah. I remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, cause Wyatt was dropping like mid 540s on the erg. Like I was at the top of the port food chain. Snowbrick had come on the scene and was moving boat. And, Bo was unstoppable at that point, right? Bo had kind of taken your position of winning the NSRs. And, Wyatt and you had gotten so close again. And I think that the real funny part is Fritz, and I'm tying it all together because it's important for the audience. This man who knew rowing physiology so well told you weren't going hard enough. And then we had a VO2 test, which is like the ultimate torture device. I really feel like it was like the Spanish Inquisition. Basement of Doc Hosey's office, dusty, no air, no windows, mask is on, nose is pinched, there's wires, EKG monitors
in between the medical files.
Between files, warming up, and it's the only VO2 test I've ever seen you pull hard on.
Yeah.
Like you went low 550s or something, like we're in the past, in 04, in the past, in 04 for reference, and like an Art of Active Rebellion, you went like 608.
Yeah. It was, I was like,
so you went for it. And I think at that point, your PR was a 549.
Yep.
And I
never got back to that, but.
Yes, you did that winter. You and Wyatt broke both broke 550, because I remember we did one random 2K and you guys were the only guys that broke 550 on that one.
There you go.
I think so, or maybe I'm mixing 04. But
no, I'll take it.
But take it. You should take it. We'll give you a 48. It was a 548.
I think I knew Bryan was back when he started shit talking again. right? Like he
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
like started to feel enough moxie that he's, between pieces, he'd start shit talking the other boats.
Yeah,
That's
maybe
what I
that's
do.
And
yeah.
but that shit talking, I think for all of us, because we started to get this momentum, but the lack of focus on one boat, we did. Mike was very funny because Bo, you and I were in that boat with Shinobi, and he just goes like, "What am I going to do? All my strokes are in one boat." And you wanted to do the 4, and
Yeah.
I really wanted to stroke the 8 because I was like, boy, childhood dream.
Mhm.
And we didn't put the best, the top athletes in the top boat, whether it was the 4 or the 8 in some way. And not, like Juice went into the 4. And so that 4, you guys had a lot of issues finding some rhythm. And I think our 8 was really inconsistent. And I'd love to know your version because you're coming back at that point, right? So we're rowing together a lot in the beginning of the summer. And then I went into the 8 and we went into the 4. It's like, what was that like for you? Because it was a qualifying year. And I think, what did you feel that pressure of qualifying the 4 now? Because that was the first time you're in that position, is not being in the 8 at a Worlds.
Yeah, I I felt a lot of pressure in that 4. And not for qualifying until the actual day when you realize you have to qualify it. That's when that ramps up quick.
Yeah.
But in the lead up, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. And it was a lot of fun to row, and it was fast. Um, and we had some really good rows leading up to that Worlds, and good rows there. I think for me, that whole regatta for us came down to one race in the semi when we were on one side of the lane at Munich, and then the French, I think, were on the other side, or maybe I think it was the French. Yeah. And we were running with the Brits almost the entire time. Like we were right there. And then in qualifying position and like gonna go through to the final, running with the top boat, we're there and it's a good piece. And we just didn't pay attention to the French all the way on the other side and the Italians on our other side. I think we were in lane 2. I can't remember exactly, but basically had 2 boats that kind of came at us at the end, and we didn't respond well. Like we didn't react and stay ahead of them, and they nipped us at the end, and we got 4th, and we're in the B final. And so it was very disappointing. I was very bummed and pissed and all of that, and I felt like we didn't perform our best. And that was like, I think, one of those moments in my career where I started to blame other people too much. Like I started to make excuses. I started to blame coaches and the system and training and blah, 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 all that stuff. And I think what that experience does, when I think back of it now, it's like, no, I got the result I deserved. Like, you don't take a year and a half off and come back and win. It's just not, that's not what people do. Like superhuman people can do it, but not most people can't do that. And so, and most people can't do it, and nobody can do it if they're like a little bit like taking things for granted at any point, right? Which is what I kind of did in the beginning of the return. And so yeah, I was pissed, but I do think it motivated me for the next year. I just remember feeling very pouty in 07, and like that just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I never wanted to be that way again.
Man, thanks for sharing that. It's also an interesting dynamic because I think all of us have to feel that we are the reason why the boat does well or it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to articulate to our audience and to young rowers that are listening, and just reminding, you have to think, maybe not for the entire race, but part of the race, that you are doing more than the other guys because it's your turn, right?
Mhm.
And if there's a result, I do think most people will look at themselves. It'd be interesting to talk to the rest of the guys in that 4 if they felt like because you're making it sound like you were the weak link of that boat. And in some ways, it's like very egotistical to say, oh, because I took the year and a half off, we didn't win that race. We didn't respond well. And it's like, is that it's just an interesting dynamic, right? Because you're making yourself so important to the success and the failure in that headspace. And I
Yeah.
don't think you're alone with that, because I will say the same thing about the 8, just for reference of that regatta. Like, I was stroking the 8 and we came in 4th. And so now we went from winning to 3rd to 4th, and I had that leadership position. And maybe the difference is, like, I had trained continually and I was probably getting close to what I think was my best. And I know I did a really good job, and Steve was behind me. And I do think, like, when I don't want to, I'm not blaming others, but it's also the realization that our 8 lineup was not the best light lineup with the best guys, because there was you, Juice, Snowbrook, and Bo, who had performed better at NSRs in practice, not in that 8. And I think that's a really, really important thing to articulate to people that listen outside of this, to get a sense of what it's like to be in the head of a top performer in the world. Is you also do have to look at, like, yeah, somebody wasn't doing enough. Somebody wasn't to the standard. And it's cool to see that you feel like you weren't to the standard. But do you think there was somebody in the 8 that was of the standard that could have made it better? Or do you guys think that there was somebody, if you guys were in the 8, we would have won, just as speculation? And it ties into, you also eventually did become the Olympic coach. So this is the beginning of you paying attention to the system. So blaming or finding excuses is one thing, but trying to find deficits to improve is another thing, because you have to be critical of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest, I feel like it was just a failure of the project of the 4 that we were trying to do. And I don't feel like it was necessarily any one person. I think it was just, we didn't rehearse enough, probably, or we didn't practice getting walkthrough. We didn't prepare well enough, for all the different scenarios that we probably would have faced in that event. And maybe we just didn't quite have the right mindset going into that event. But I would say it was a collective failure. It wasn't like, no one did something egregious that, like, set it off the rails. It's like, just being unprepared, and like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. That's just, like, adds up. And then the next thing you know, you're 7th or 8th, and it's like, you're
that
fighting
narrow
for
margin.
Yeah, you're fighting for qualification.
That
And
narrow margin.
yeah, and I think the other thing is that when I look back on it now, like, when you talk about coaching, I don't think we debriefed enough. We didn't analyze enough over, like, what could have gone wrong to address it. And so, I think that comes back into play for me as a coach later in my later.
Right. And do you think that your nonchalantness or that gamemanship that you, let's say, earned because of the fitness and the training, you didn't take a year off, right?
Yeah.
Do you think you relied too heavily on that former skill versus trying to gain new ones?
Yeah, I think so. Because we didn't have it at that regatta, we got walked through, which normally I would be doing that,
And
And
I know
so,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I know it was, yeah, it's humbling.
And the reason why I'm drawing this out, and I appreciate you taking me to this place, because it's not easy to relive our losses, but I think that's where we find real good lessons, right? Failure is a great teacher. And so that's effectively, and I'm just saying it out loud, is that's the worst performance you've ever had at a world championships at this point, even
Yeah.
more so. And I also love that the fact that you're saying you did not choke, right? You just could have done some little margin things better. Like, you still had a great performance, which you did, right? It was a
Mhm.
narrow loss, and that event is so competitive in its
Yeah.
depth. So, and that was I think that was the last time the 8 had a semifinal too. So the 8 field was deep.
Oh,
So it
yeah,
was a
that was
really
deep, yeah.
deep. It was a very deep world championships. So now I'm really intrigued, because painting that picture realizes, like, that might be, in some ways, in the story of Bryan Volpenhein, the hardest deficit you had to bounce back from. And I'd love to know how you handled coming off of 07, going into that Olympic year, and what you decided to, like, start to work on to get us to Beijing.
I think it was I mean, it was mostly just like, um, I don't know. I don't think it was anything like that I set out to do. It wasn't anything that I was like, okay, I'm going to make this change and I'm going to do it. It was more like, um, I'm going for the 8. The 4's done. I've kind of scratched that itch, and I'm not the same athlete that I was, and I think I need the other people around me more than I have before. Um, in a lot of ways, and so it was like, okay, I need to go back to the 8, and I need to, see if we can do that again.
And Mike goes and throws a wrench in it and tries to get us to make a 4 out in San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take the audience a little bit through what I think that
It's
training
the
was
next
like,
12
because
months. Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
the
what
next
is
12 months,
12 months.
because we have a really good template for winning an 04 that we decide not to follow for all 08. It's
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
different. We go to Clemson, we break the group up. It's not everyone together. It's now 2 separate groups. Half are training San Diego, like more than half is in Clemson. Mike sends you out there to try and make a 4. I get pulled into it at some point. So from that perspective, it wasn't the same winter as 04. So
Yeah.
I guess, to really not drag the whole audience through another just boring training cycle of winter training
Yeah.
and be masochists, but at what point did you start to feel like we did have the potential to be a fast 8 again?
I would say when we came out of that Clemson camp a little bit. Like, Clemson was hard. Like, we were there for what, 5 months?
Yeah.
And I think mostly sent us to Chula Vista to just, or where did we go? Yeah, we went there, right?
Went to Chula.
And I think mostly just to like get me out of his hair, probably. Or like he probably sensed that I was like not happy and getting grumpy, and so he probably was like, okay, let's get some sunshine for Volp, and just, he's like a little bit catering to me, probably. Um, I think like after that camp was not easy. It was very long. It was very hard. It was hard to see if we were getting any faster. It was really hard to like get a sense of like any kind of speed, or like if what you were doing was working. It was just like, it felt very confusing and like discombobulating. And so I think when we got back
Pieces
from
in
that,
fog, and
yeah, and
you're
like
on a different lake that you don't know times for. And
yeah, and there's no buoys, and you're doing these like super long rows into all these different coves and in and out of it. It just wasn't.
yeah.
And
Do
you remember
CrossFit lifting?
Yeah,
Do you remember
CrossFit
we
lifting.
used to we would do those long rows and Mike would be yelling, and then you'd look over at the launch and like Matt would like turn around and like jiggle the gas tank and then tap Mike on the shoulder and be like, yeah,
We got to go
we gotta
in.
turn we gotta turn around. We don't have enough
Yeah.
gas. If we go any further, we're not gonna make it back to the boathouse.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, it was long, and it was just like,
Yeah.
it wore on us. And so I think coming out of that back to Princeton was like sort of refreshing, and it was like good to be back. Um and then I think when I knew when was it we put up that 156 750?
Well, that was I mean, that
That
was
was
after
That was
we were
later.
named.
that was after the boat
Named.
was named. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, we
Yeah,
had the
I
two
mean,
eights.
NS
We had the 2.8s
yeah.
in Princeton when like 1.8 went like 520 and the other one went like 522. And
Yeah.
Barry was name the boat, name the
Yeah,
boat.
babies in the basket. But the NSR, I think, was important because you had, you won an NSR again.
Yeah.
So the first one made the final, and then you and JR got together and you won. And I think that,
Yeah.
and
So that one, I will say that one, I think I won that one by the most that I had ever won one. And that was the most aggressive I had ever raced in it. Like, I actually probably ever raced a pair at all. And I remember that race vividly. And I remember JR just being like talking the whole time. And I remember just like, I was like, I'd made up my mind. I was like, that's it. I'm just gonna go so hard he can't talk. At one point, he's like, "Philip, what are you doing?" And it's like, I roll like a 40, just trying to keep him into the
Yeah,
buoy. So he's,
yeah, I remember.
But I think that was the start of like, I wanted to prove a point that it's like, we got to start showing some speed. And so I really like, if you watch that race, I think it's online somewhere, that about 600 meters in, I kind of make a decision to just keep going like really hard and high. And we move a lot over that next middle, that like middle 1,000.
Yep.
And so I think that for me was like, it's time to make a statement that like, we got to start putting up some speed. And so, that's how that race went down for me. And
That
it was
nearly
like,
cost me the Olympic campaign, that
yeah,
race.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know how, yeah, but and then I feel like selection kind of got a little confusing at times. I honestly don't quite remember a ton of the selection. Um, I remember it. I remember the boat when I thought we had a chance is when Inman was stroking is when I thought we had the best chance.
Yeah, at one point we had 2 8s that were consistently breaking 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And like in not even ideal conditions, right? So
Yeah.
we were having training times and that step 2K that Steve is talking about, where that we went 5:20 in a step 2K, so without a start and a sprint. So the core like, from what I remember, the core started to form where it was like me and Josh on port and you and Wyatt on starboard. And that started to have some consistency.
Mhm.
And then where selection started to kind of get weird is that we had that straight four, or that started to form, that was Brett, Paul Tatey, David Banks, so Brett Newland and Giuseppe Lanzone.
Yeah.
And so they went off to Lucerne, and then 2 8 stayed home, and they got a bronze medal. And then it was like, okay, and then Mike just kind of named them the four out of nowhere. We thought we were going to continue to select. They got named the four. And then it came into that end. So we had 4 guys that could have been in contention for those other 4 seats. Then came down to what was like Micah, Deacon, Beery, Leafsky, right? And then Bo. And Bo really told the story when it came down to that last seat race of
Yeah. I remember
Bo
that.
over. Yeah. And so I think that's, to me, where I felt like we really had a chance to win, because I think both of those thousands were so fast, because all of us were like, I'm not going to be the reason either one of these guys loses, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it was like this piece has to be the fairest of all fairnesses, and just they
yeah,
have to know, whoever loses has to know they got beat. It was like brother against brother, man, and
yeah,
those times were screaming fast. And I think
yeah,
that was it. It was kind of like, okay, whoever's in this boat, because the difference between those two was like a less than a second, I felt
yeah.
like. So, and that was Josh stroking. You're right.
Yeah, it
And
was a
then,
half second.
yeah, and that was Josh stroking at that point. And I think we didn't try you in stroke until after the boat was named, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. But I could be wrong, because it's hazy.
No, it is hazy, but I do think like I remember vividly talking to Mike about that. Like I went to Mike and I just we had to talk about it, and I just said, Mike, I said, I think the boat is faster with Josh stroking and I'm in 7. And I feel like that's an example of like um living a little bit too much in the past and not sort of like being clear-eyed about what's right in front of you. And so it's there's reasons for that. Like Mike trusted me. He trusted my experience, and like he wanted me in that stroke seat. And also Marcus was the coxswain, so he felt like Marcus and I would be a better combination up there. But for me, I just felt like that my role, like it felt a more natural role to me to be behind Josh in that 7 seat, because he can shine. A little bit of the pressure is off of me, which then takes a little bit of the pressure off the boat. And I can talk to Josh the whole time. Like I can I can back him up and be that supporting role, which I thought would have worked better for us. Cause I think you know, for Josh, that would have been super motivating, and he would have had a lot to prove in the strokes, and he was doing a great job. And so we were going fast with him up there. So I didn't see the need to change it. But, you know,
Yeah.
Mike asked me to do it. And so I did.
Well, I think that's what led to is we put you in stroke. And that's when we started really cracking off some faster times, though, training times. So I think, it'd be interesting to go back in time but that's when I think we went, 3:55. Mike's got, one of us has to ask Mike to photocopy it, but from what I understand, every time he says like, I want the boat that pulled these times. And it's like, that's 08. And he's like, he thinks it's 04. So we started breaking the training times from 04. I think that's where we started.
Yeah.
And then we had those 750s that were just like, the joke was, Justin made this joke is like, let's do a 2-minute 750. Cause that's 120 pace. And these guys in 04 wound up going like, 57. And it was like, we're going to do a minute 57, 2-minute pieces or some joke. And then we started cracking like the 157s, 150. So I think that was where we had a lot of competition. So we've made the boat. I think it's interesting that you felt like there was a position and 7 to be supportive, but we get to Beijing and I feel comfortable saying this part. The heat didn't go as well as we planned. And so did you, now knowing the 2000 story, did you kind of have a like, oh no, here we go again moment?
No, I don't remember that. Like, I don't remember feeling like panicked or anything. No. I feel like, I think it was more like I felt like the extra race might be good for us.
Yeah. Well, because we hadn't done a full 2K.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And I think we hadn't sorted out our start yet and like how the start went. And like, we hadn't figured out how to like go really hard off the start and then sustain it. Like, I felt like in that boat, it was like, we're flat out for 1500 and then we fade, or we're easier and then we sprint. We never really had like both ends of the race. And so I feel like we kind of messed around with a little bit of that in the rep.
Yep. And we win the
Well,
rep.
it never felt, it always felt like we had confidence in the speed and we were just like, okay, let's try this. Like, we're fast, but let's try this. Like, let's.
So just for the audience, and again, like we know that not everybody's going to be watching this on video and listening to it on different platforms. Dan and Steve are in the boat with you, Volp, in 08, in the 8, in the Olympics, right? So what, Volp's sitting in stroke, Steve, you're what, 5, and Dan, you're 4? Is that correct? Or is it
no, it goes
vice versa?
It goes Brian, Josh Inman, Steve, myself, Wyatt, Michael Boyd, Matt Snowberg, and Bo Hootman with Marcus and Stroke.
Marcus and Cox.
Thank you.
Yeah. Marcus is smaller than I am, so I know he's on stroke of the boat.
Who's tired? Who's tired now?
I'm
Who's tired now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, again, just for the audience to give context, so 3 out of the 5 people on the call or on the show.
Justin, we need you to like keep us out of the minutia because like
I'm trying.
Yeah, you're doing a good job. So
all right, so you're all in the Olympic Games. You're all rowing in a heat that you are saying like, hey, like we're here. We've just gone through this cycle, right? Like Volp's had an amazing journey, throughout the Pac Northwest to the heart of South Carolina and back. And now you're at the Olympic Games and you don't do well in your first heat, right? So yeah, to Dan's question, like panic button is not pushed, to your point, Brian. I think that's obviously a maturity level of experience. That'd be my assertion. And then take us from there, dude.
I remember the whole conversation being around race strategy and like, how are we going to change our race strategy? And I think there was a lot of back and forth within the crew of like what we wanted to do. Some guys wanted to go out harder. Some guys kind of felt like if we did that, we would blow up. And I don't think we ever arrived on a consensus.
No, we weren't good at that.
And was
We
that an
weren't, yeah.
internal boat dialogue, or was
It
that a
was-
conversation with Mike as well?
With Mike, yeah, he
Okay.
wanted
It
us
was
to
actually
go out
guided.
harder.
It was also guided with Tim McLaren and was in there, and
Yeah,
was Bo Hansen in there, or was that
No,
Yeah.
no, Bo,
No.
no,
Wasn't
and Bo,
there.
well, Bo Hopeman
No.
kind of Bo Hopeman kind of shut it down. It's like, so
yeah.
we
Yeah.
we were ready to race, I think, on the first day, and then the typhoon delayed our race. So the Canadians actually raced on
Mhm.
Sunday, whatever, Monday of their heat. They won their heat. We were in the warm-up lane, and then a typhoon was coming through, and they canceled our race. So we had to go on the ergs, warm up, and the Brits were next to us. So talking to Alex Partridge, who was in that British 8, who's a friend of mine, basically said they were taking it very professional, and we looked very casual, and they thought, oh, they're not taking this seriously. And they kind of felt like they could get us. So from his perspective, which is interesting, we do our heat the next day. We're a little bit off the schedule. We go off the line, and the Brits just took a power move, caught us off guard, because I think we were very casual in that heat. We thought we were going to ride the legacy of 04. Took a move on us. We had a scrambly race, and it was like, okay, I just remember feeling like, oh, we just fucked up, and this is the Olympics, and if you have a little bit of an error, that's what happens. You lose the heat.
Yeah.
So going back to this rep to get ready for it was like, we had the Australians, and they were fast too. Jimmy Tompkins, like, full circle now, the guy that's taught us all how to row a pair basically through you, is now we're racing against him. He's trying to go for his gold in the 8 because it's the only Olympic gold he doesn't have in sweep. And they're fast. They had a bad heat because they lost to Finn. And we're like, we got to beat them to prove that we're fast. And what I remember from that race, man, is that's when I knew you had your gamemanship back, because they got out on us.
Mhm.
And we stayed so calm in that rep. It was like, yeah, let them go. I just remember feeling like it's okay, because
Yeah,
we're going to sprint them down. And then we got to like the last 300. Marcus made a call. We changed gears and just went boop, and it was like, oh yeah, we can change speeds.
yeah.
So that's what I remember. We win that rep. We're getting ready for the final. And I think that's where I'm still confused to this day, because like, we had a bad start. And I think for the audience, and Justin, I've told you, and Luke, you've known this forever, and Steve, you lived it. We were the fastest 8 for 3/4 of that race, the second, third, and fourth 500. But that start, right?
Yeah.
That start literally cost us a gold. And I would love to know your perspective as somebody who choked in 2000, won in 04. What was going through your head?
Yeah. There was a little bit of panic there in my head at that point. Like, we were down a lot. And I have notorious for looking out of the boat. And I looked once in the beginning of that race and saw how far down we were, and realized that we have a lot of work to do. But it never felt to me like we were out of it. I think we were still in touch with a couple crews, and I just went to work like we just trying to pick off 1 or 2 people. And I think the Dutch were there or nearby. I
Mhm.
can't remember if it was them. I think it was them. And so once we started to move on them, like, that's when we started to get a little bit of flow going, a little bit of rhythm. And then it was like, oh, this is the 1500s we've done. And then the confidence started to build from there. And then the second half of that race was all downhill. Like, that felt like we were running downhill. And like if we had another 100 meters, we might have caught the Brits. I definitely caught the Brits. I don't know if we caught the Canadians. I think they were well out, but
That Bo thinks we would have won, and Snowbird does, because they were in the bow. The race, if you watch the race, again, I don't know the guy who won and has an Olympic record, how much he watches himself. Oh, and this is where I got bronze. No, I'm not going to watch that one. I'm going to watch the other one. But the line, we were so tight with the Brits.
It's close.
The stroke before and after the line,
Yeah.
we were in silver, and they hit the line at the right time. And it was 1.2 seconds between us and the Canadians. I don't think about that every day.
Yeah. Well,
Can't tell.
Yeah.
Sure, it wasn't
Yeah.
1.
You might have been looking out, so you knew we were bronze. I honestly, I looked over at one of the guys in the British boat, and I was like, "Who?" And they were like, "I don't know." Like, I remember like the guys in the middle of the boat, in our boat and the British boat, were like watching the
clock.
screen
Yeah, the screen.
to see like
There's a screen.
the
It was
results
really-
pop up.
It was really close, but we came from really far down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it was an almost perfect race, man. It really was. And I think that
Yeah.
I think the cool thing from that being in the middle of the boat, right? Like it's like being in that engine room seat is you know, at the 1,000, it was just this moment of like, all right, we either finally show up to be like, you are an Olympic champion, but I think the word champion is really important for an athlete to understand it. A champion always gets up, they don't always win.
yeah.
And that was a really champion moment for us at that halfway mark, to just not let the pressure and let the failures and like that failure that happened literally just, you know, 2 minutes and 49 seconds earlier define the rest of that race. And it is hard to not have won. And I was very curious about how this conversation was going to go, but to know that you didn't give up, right?
Yeah,
To know
no.
that you were the leader, and to know that at that 1,000, when we took that push and just said, it's time to arrive. I think that's really important for every athlete to remember, is that until the race is over, you never, ever, ever, ever give up.
Yeah.
And no matter how far behind you are, you find a way to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I love to hear that you felt like we got to the point where you felt like an Olympic champion again in speed, but maybe not result.
Yeah. And you know, it's like, I think in the back of my head or subconsciously, 2000 was always in there. Like, I'm not gonna quit. And like, this is not going to be one of those races where I get done with it. And I'm like, what just happened? It was like, oh no, we're going for this, and we're going to try to win this fucking thing. And it was just like all after, at that point, it was just all focused on, you know, rhythm and being aggressive and
Yeah.
just rowing at our full length.
Mm.
And so, and the other thing I remember about that race is like, I was really happy after the race. You know, I think I was just like, at no point was I disappointed with the result. And it was like, I think it was because of the effort that went into it. You know, you think about, you know, you had to go through the rep to get there. Like, you think about the whole year, all that time in Clemson, it was like, man, it could have gone south pretty easily here for us. And so, I was very happy with that result.
Yeah, hey, dude, you helped me, going. I was so angry that we didn't win. And again, you go back to like, you don't win, you're the different guy in the boat, or one of 5, and there's 3 Olympic champions in the boat. And, you have that doubt that creeps in, everybody's watching on TV. And I just remember we're on our way, like we're making our way through the dock, and you just looked at me and you're like, dude, you're an Olympic medalist, bro.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I just said, like, I was like, and I said to you, I was like, I'm sorry. And you just went, for what? For what?
Yeah. It
You
was
had that
awesome.
couch moment. You
Yeah,
had that
and
couch moment.
No,
Yeah.
and I think that, and then what that ties me into is, thank you. I really struggle with it, man. I have to admit, and I think it's important for this audience to know, is like, being the spare in 04 and being bronze and being that close, that for a long time I was depressed about those moments,
Mhm.
feeling like I was not good enough. And I was not good enough to win an Olympic gold medal those times. But I think the value and the self-worth is having friends like you who have the trinket and don't judge me any less because mine is a lesser color. Don't judge Luke any less because he doesn't, I think that's really important for you as a leader of being the ultimate. You really did have that coaching moment that helps me, right? And you pick up the phone and you know when I need you. And I think that also shows into like why you do what you do now. And I would love for you to tell the audience and tell us, like, what are you up to now, man?
I am still coaching. I couldn't get away. I tried to get away from coaching the same way I did with rowing, and I'm back again. So currently I'm in Oklahoma. and coaching Oklahoma City University men's and women's team. It's a small program, but it's been a lot of fun. And so I just started though, so we'll see how it goes. It's very fun to coach again, and it's good to be back into it. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing people got to, I think, going back to your point, is like winning is at anything is very, very hard, and few people get to do it. And so you have to like really appreciate all the moments along the way. That's where the value is. It's not in the actual result. It's in the getting there. That's where all the value is. And that's where you learn everything. The result just makes you feel good or bad on a particular day, and maybe when you're having some memories, but that is far outweighed by all the good memories you have leading up to that point. And so in terms of coaching, that's kind of the one of the things I've been trying to like learn and convey to people as I coach them. I still have a long way to go in my coaching career. I think I've made some mistakes, and had some success, but not quite at the level that I would want to. It makes me want to keep going, basically. And so I'm trying to learn from those mistakes and not do them again. So but yeah, I mean, how far back do you want me to go with coaching?
I mean, I'll let Justin dictate this one because he knows I can go on a rant when it comes to coaching.
Yeah, I think you don't have to do every element. I think it'll be interesting. I think you had a full circle moment with coaching. I think it'll be important for the audience to understand what that is. I think that, I think it's important to understand where the pivot came in after 08, right? So you did 3 cycles, you rode in 3 Olympic games. Like where did that pivot come in? And then certainly I think there's some full circleness that came into the coaching world for you, as far as who you coached and what you did, and then obviously where you are now. I actually I want to come back to the Oklahoma City piece, because I think it's really interesting as I try to connect Ohio State to this.
Mhm.
You'll get to there in a second, but yeah, just quickly, like, where was that pivot where you're like, all right, I might get behind the boat in a launch versus in the boat, I think is a really important pivot for you. And then obviously kind of some of the full circuitness.
Yeah, so I after 08, my plan was to go to Seattle and find a job in a kitchen.
Cool.
That's what I was going to do. And as I was driving across country, I got a call
It's a
from
theme on this show, driving across
yeah,
country, by
exactly,
the
a
way.
lot of driving.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Callahan saying that there's this position open at the Pocock Rowing Center, and they want to, revamp their high performance group, and I think you should go apply. So I basically just drove straight to the boathouse and interviewed there, and ended up getting the job. And I ended up with a small group, a little bit like I have now, where it was a mix of men and women, lightweights, heavyweights, and I just started coaching them, and it was so much fun. I had so much fun with that group. I mean, I was still young. I was fresh off the Olympics. I was just retired. I was like, I could still do what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I felt really connected to them and to that group. And I loved Seattle. It was a lot of fun to be there. So that was like the launching point of my coaching career. And, from there, it just kind of snowballed. Like I got from that group, a couple of guys made the lightweight team in 09. A couple of the women did as well. And then in 2010, I got invited to come to Oklahoma City and, work with their high performance group with John Parker. And he hired me as his assistant. So I moved out here. And then it was really kind of like a crazy way that I got onto the sort of national team coaching. So I'm in Oklahoma City. Some things happen in Oklahoma City, and like John is let go, and like I got a call from Glenn Mary saying, hey, you're going to have to take over this program. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I ended up, this is like 2010, 2011, like taking over the group. And he had a big group here in Oklahoma City. It was like 20 some people. And out of that group, we selected the lightweight boats, basically. We selected lightweight 8 and the heavyweight pair. And so I took those boats to, in the lightweight 4. And I took those boats to the Worlds and bled, and then promptly fell flat on my face and didn't qualify the lightweight 4. And the pair did, but they didn't do very well. And they did okay, but not great. And so that was my first like really like serious coaching, like, oh, this is a whole different game. I got to learn how to like communicate better. I got to learn how to like, explain what I'm trying to say. I got to like understand training better. I got to understand there's so many facets that you don't think about as an athlete, that you think as an athlete, but you don't really know. And so like all this, like I thought that I was like, I'm gonna not do this. I'm not gonna make that mistake. I'm gonna fix this problem. I'm gonna do all these things right. And I did basically all of them wrong. And and so and that will throw you like really it basically was just push me off into the deep end, because like now at this point this is 2011, so we're going into 2012 Olympics, and somehow I'm in charge of the lightweights, and so I have to select the lightweight 4 and take them to the qualification regatta and see if we can qualify. And so that was like terrifying. I mean, I was motivated to do it. I was like, doing my best. And I learned a lot that summer of just like how to be honest with people, how to be straight with people, and how to like really convey what I need them, what I'm trying to get them to do. And so I learned a lot about that. I had Tim McLaren around me. I had Corzo with me, and Mike was, not around, but I still talked to him. So I had a lot of good help around me, which was good. Yeah. And then the selection of that lightweight 4, I think, was pretty formative for me, because that was the first time I really had to select in a high pressure environment. And there's a lot of mistakes you can make in that situation. And, to this day, I think I picked the right 4 guys. But there's always a doubt in your head, especially when you don't do as well as you had hoped. I mean, we qualified the boat. That was a big deal. But the selection of it leading up, it's like at one point it was so frustrating because they couldn't stay on rate during the selection pieces. And so I just decided, okay, now everything's open. And we did open 2Ks. That was how I selected the boat, basically time trial, and just did different lineups and landed on the one that ended up qualifying the boat.
Gotcha.
And they got second they got 8th in London, which was the best the lightweight 4 had done since 96, I think.
That's a brutal event, and that was a brutal year too. Like it was a good result. Like it's a good result.
Yeah.
So,
but go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Finish your thought.
This will show you how young I was and inexperienced I was, and how much I probably still have to learn, but especially did have to learn back then. I was coaching the heavyweight pair too, and they both of those boats got 8th. And I remember one day I like overslept and like just missed the bus, and they're just like waiting for me at the Olympics. Their coach isn't there. Like it's like that kind of stuff. Like you don't think about that stuff as an athlete, but that kind of stuff can never happen as, what I mean, as a coach.
Yeah.
That stuff shouldn't happen. So a lot of lessons there that those few years.
So then fast forward, so you kind of go through the Olympic cycle now on the other side of the fence, so to speak. As a coach. And then so I mean, was that more like, all right, I'm all in on this. I want to coaching is my career path. Here's how I want to kind of move through that. Because obviously, you still had a culinary kind of, element to your repertoire. So yeah, just curious as to like, you know,
Yeah, no,
even though you didn't have ultimate, you know, by your measure, maybe ultimate success, within that um first foray, how's that transpire?
um, I no, I really liked it. I really enjoyed the coaching. I
Cool.
enjoyed the guys. I enjoyed, it was
That
that
process.
environment. Yeah, that whole process and that environment had been my life for so long that like
Sure.
I think part of me was um very reluctant to give it up and honestly probably a little bit scared to like go do something else. Um and so I think that I just kind of loved being around that environment and being a part of it and trying, and it was new again. It was like something that, I was learning new skills and I was doing a lot of things, um, exploring a lot of different things that I hadn't done before and like trying to learn a bunch. And so it was challenging. It was difficult. But in the end, it was a lot of fun to be around people like that. Um, and so when I got the chance to coach the heavyweights, I just jumped on it because I was like, it's the kind of thing where like if someone asks you to do that, you're just going to say yes, even if in the back of your head you kind of know you might not be ready.
Uh-huh.
Because who's going to turn that down, right? Especially someone with my background, like I just felt like I was ready,
Right.
you know. And this
And
was
it, you and you
2013.
were and you were doing a good job. I mean, you were
Yeah.
in charge of the four, and it was doing well.
Yeah, they were doing well.
You're meddling, right? Like, and
Oh,
it's
Oh, so when I took over the heavyweights, like it was with Luke McGee, who's now at Syracuse Women, and Luke and I rode together, and we knew each other, and we're good friends, and so that just felt like a good combination, and it worked really well the first 2 years of that cycle. This is the Rio cycle.
Right.
In 2013, we came out hot. And it was like young coaches, a lot of attitude, a lot of like kind of like bravado sort of. And the crews raced that way. They raced really hard, they raced really aggressive, and they had a lot of fun doing it. And so the four, we go to Lucerne, and the four that I was coaching and the eight that Luke was coaching both won. And then you know, we didn't do as well at Worlds, but we still came away with medals. And
and
so
and just a really important point that I want to draw here is it is the first World Championships that the men's team had won and a medal in two Olympic events since 1997,
yeah,
which was the 8 and the pair, and hadn't been done again until this next Olympics, or this just past Olympics, where we won the 4 and bronze in the 8.
yeah,
So I like how you're glossing over it, but I think it's just really important for the audience to know of like the gravitas of seeing two American coaches that went through the American system coaching the next generation athletes to not a Lucerne double win and a double medal was a really big deal, not an easy feat. And you guys did that, right? Like that's an
yeah,
amazing feat as a US national team coach to medal in those two events. Like well done. And it was awesome to see.
yeah. And it was a really good starting point for us and a confidence builder for us. Um, and then so we just kind of kept doing what we were doing. We were training them hard. The guys were excited. They were working hard. Everybody was fairly happy. And so that was great. And then 2014, uh, I was lucky enough to keep the same four together, and we ended up getting a silver at Worlds that year. And so that was a great result. And I felt like we were on a path to sort of get to the Olympics in a really good competitive place. And then after that year is kind of where it all kind of comes falling apart a little bit. And that's where the inexperience of Luke and I, and then combined with like the lack, I would say, of sort of administrative support and like managerial support from around us, like didn't help guide us very well, and we weren't equipped to sort of make a lot of those decisions that we could have made. um where so you had Charlie and Glenn in the pair come back in 2014. They rode the pair, and then they were back in the mix for 2015. And they were kind of like me, like they were like medalists, you know, in the 4 from London. They were coming back for the next Olympics. They had taken some time off and they were a little bit out of shape in the beginning, but then by 2015, they were like they were like the fastest pair by far. And so that kind of threw a wrench into the 4 selection. And then I think the training that we had been doing with the guys had kind of burnt out some of the other guys that had been through in the system for a little too, like for the whole time. And so that frayed a little bit. And it just was like, it started to get tense and it started to get a little bit combative within the group. And it started to get a little bit like kind of nasty at times. And I think what I take away from that is as being a coach, that going through that 2015 and 2016 and, you know, qualifying the 4, but not the 8 in 2015, and then having to go through the qualifier again with the 8, and then not doing well in the 4, which was the kind of like the flagship crew those previous years at Rio, that making those mistakes was like, it just shows how naive I think I was in thinking that I could do it and thinking that it was just going to come easy on, not easy, but like I was going to be able to figure it out along the way.
Right. Yep.
And I think that was a very challenging quadrennial, but it helped me quite a bit, like in terms of like my growth as a coach. I made a lot of mistakes those years that I hope I never make again.
Got it. So, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I think, I mean, look, you lived it like an athlete and you lived it like a coach, right? And I think it's just, you have such a brilliant story arc of what it means to be in the high performance mindset for so long. And that's a real reason why I'm just,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
for those counting, that's 5 Olympic cycles.
Yeah.
Just
that's
saying,
20,
it's 5. It's 5 straight
that's,
games.
yeah, that's
just
20,
FYI.
20 years, right? It's
20 years of going to the games. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, thank you so much for like sharing the mistakes along with the glory, because I think you know it from both sides. And, I just leave it at this, like, it would have been nice to see you and Luke get another shot. And, but I think for the rowing world and for a lot of kids, I think this is really what I want to kind of finish with, right? Because you're back in coaching, and in a lot of ways, you're coaching at Oklahoma City again in a way where it almost started, because Pocock was like barely a year. And so you're back.
Well, to me, it's Ohio State, right? It's kind of hey, the people, maybe a program on the upswing, right? Like new adventures for some people, right? I'm imagining you, you have some walk-ons, right? It's got to be reminiscent, right? It's got to feel a little bit kind of like, familiar.
It does, yeah. It does feel familiar.
So I'll let Dan kind of close it. Yeah, go back to Dan, but that's just kind of the connection I was going to make.
And I just think it's, I don't want to gloss over it too much. And it's just, you're married to Sarah Trowbridge, the she-Volp, and she's a coach too. And you're, at one point you were coaching at the University of Pennsylvania, building that team, and you helped them get through COVID. You helped them get through a flood. You helped them get through a boathouse build. She gets the opportunity to go to Oklahoma and be the head women's coach there. And I think that it gets you back to where you are. And I'm not trying to gloss over the coaching so much as then I really want to finish this out, because we've really been fortunate enough to get so much of your time, man. Like, it's not every day any of us get to tell our story in such detail, and you've gotten to tell so much. And I think we're going to have you on again. I think at some point, as a support bunny, or maybe it's fast friends with Volp edition, but there's just so much knowledge that the rowing world needs to hear from you, because you're willing to put the mistakes out there. So with a final question for tonight from me, and I'll actually shut up for once, maybe, is
Sure.
If you could go back in time and coach yourself, at what time of your life would it be? and what would you say to yourself?
I think I would go back. I think I would go back to that 08 era, like, leading into that Olympics. So 07, 08 time. And I think I would tell myself to just sort of grow up a little bit more and be a better leader and like take it a little bit more seriously in a sense. Like I took it seriously, obviously, but like to just grow a little bit more and grow up a little bit more. I didn't really talk about it, but like during that time, like my personal life was a mess through all of that. That whole, like those 2 years, it just was a disaster for me. I was making bad choices all over the place. And so if I could go back, I would go back then and like basically just like shake myself and just say snap out of it and fucking grow up a little bit and be the, 32-year-old you're supposed to be. Don't act like you're 18 still, and I think that's an interesting thing about, being in a high performance environment like that. You kind of you it's you don't always continue to grow up. So it's like, yeah, my maturity levels could have accelerated a bit quicker. So I think that's where I would go.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Oh, dude, this was awesome.
Hey man, thanks.
I think we could do 100 episodes if we wanted to get into the minutia, and we'll save
Yeah, we
that
could.
for we'll save that for yet another time. But because of you, again, I'm inspired. I want to keep kind of putting this out there for the audience, and I really appreciate you being this lightning bolt for us right at the time when we, we're going from 10 episode and now you're technically 11, and I really appreciate you being one of my fastest friends, if not on paper the fastest.
What does that certificate mean anyway?
Yeah.
No, Bryan, thank you for your time. And again, like I think it's been a fascinating journey. I think that I don't, no, I probably don't need to remind you, but you've been rowing longer than you haven't been rowing, right?
Yeah.
Like you've had more of your life on the water than you've had it off the water. And I think that you know, you're obviously entrenched in the sport. You're probably going to be entrenched in the sport in a really long time. I can't wait to see like where you go, what you do, how you build programs. And then obviously, yeah, being a friend of the show and a friend to us has been awesome. And yeah, thanks for coming on and obviously taking a good amount of time to talk to us. So
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do
Yeah.
it, guys. This has been great. I'll come back
Thanks,
on
man.
and just throw anecdotal stories in there of
Yeah.
all the
Yeah,
stuff
that's what we want. That'd
all
be
the
great.
stuff we
Yeah.
missed.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, we'll sign off before we get going all over again. But Bryan, we thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Mettle Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.